Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the live Healthy Aging conversation on Facebook. It's 4 o'clock, so we're ready to begin. I'm Jeremy Hughes. I was the former Chief Executive of Alzheimer's Society, and I'm Vice Chair of the World Dementia Council. And I've been asked by Care Vision's Healthy Aging to host this weekly conversation. So some of you may have seen me talking to David Brindle last Thursday, which was a precursor to these weekly conversations and was setting the scene for what's going to come. The plan is to have these conversations with you joining us every Tuesday afternoon at 4 o'clock. So put this in your diary as a regular date. And the idea is to increase people's understanding and conversation around healthy aging and dementia. What can we do as a society and community to help people live better when they're getting older, and to help people who have responsibility as a carer for someone with dementia, or living with dementia, or indeed as professional working with someone with dementia, to get the best out of life, even though it changes when you start living with dementia. So just to say a little bit about Care Vision's Healthy Aging, I first came across them through the World Dementia Council because of the innovative work they've been doing in China to develop new approaches to the support of people with dementia. And since then, they've started doing work in the UK, initially in the London Borough of Camden, face-to-face, and driven by coronavirus, they've started putting material on YouTube. So they've got their own YouTube site where they put videos pretty much every week, designed and presented by their dementia therapists. And the idea is to bring support to people in their own homes when they're not able to join in community activities. And a number of you, I'm sure, have already looked at the Care Vision's videos. If you haven't, please do so. And one of the things we'll be talking about today is what we think of those videos and how they can continue to develop over time. So my plan in these weekly conversations is to have a guest or two every week. And I made a commitment when I took it on to say we would start with, as we are today, the voice of people with lived experience of dementia. And every few weeks, we will come back to somebody who's living with dementia or a family caregiver of somebody with dementia and talk to them about their lived experience. Because one thing I'm proud of that we put in place at Alzheimer's Society is a real commitment that the driving force and the experts in this are the people with the personal experience. So no two people better to start with than Roberts and Jayne Goodrick, who many of you will know from 4 years ago when they did the Panorama program, where they literally invited people into their own home. You'll saw a lot more of their home than you're going to see today, when the cameras were there showing people what everyday life was like for Chris and Jayne. And since then, they've been living with dementia and learning to cope and manage and make the best of the opportunities that come, because it's not only challenges, but it's also opportunities that come. So what I want to do is just invite Chris and Jayne to talk about their experience. I'll chip in with a few questions. You can use the chat box, which you can get up on your screen, to put your own questions forward. And towards the end of this afternoon, we've got half an hour or so, we'll come back to any questions you've put forward. But Chris and Jayne, why don't you just start by saying a little bit about everyday life, particularly everyday life with coronavirus when you're living with dementia. What's it like at the moment?
Ladies first.
Well, we've had, as you alluded to, we've had a very busy schedule over the past number of years, going around speaking about Chris's experience of dementia, about my experience of living with Chris. My mum also has dementia, and she's currently at end of life with esophageal cancer. So the biggest problem for me with the coronavirus lockdown, COVID lockdown, has been, are we going to be able to see my mum before she actually dies? Now, fortunately, the restrictions have been eased, and I was able to go and see her in the garden at a distance. And the difference in her has been remarkable. However, we can't put it all down to dementia. She does have the cancer, and the cancer is starting to take its toll. But her cognition is gone. She knows who I am, but she can't have a conversation. And again, it's the masking thing. She uses her deafness as a dementia mask. She said, "Oh, I can't hear you, I can't hear you." But actually, she doesn't understand when we're trying to have a conversation. We've noticed that Chris's cognition, because we had such a busy lifestyle before, we were going all over the place and doing talks. Chris is also, with the lockdown, with having very limited conversations that we do at home, his fluency has become less fluent. You're struggling to find your words more, and your short-term memory is shot now compared to how it was before. Have you noticed?
Yeah, I've noticed my memory slipping quite a bit, but that's a good thing. Dementia's prepared me, I think, for this lockdown period, because I've got used to not seeing people. I've got used to being on my own. You know, you isolate yourself when you've got dementia anyway, from noises and big places. So it's put me in good stead. And with the memory thing, out of sight, out of mind, I think. So I haven't found it as bad as I thought I would.
And how about Chris, for both of you, Chris and Jane, leaving aside coronavirus, one of the things that people I don't think understand about dementia is how it can vary from day to day, or even during the day. It's not just the same all the time, is it? What do you experience about the ups and downs of living with dementia?
No half hour, no minute is the same. I can be absolutely not understanding things, not being able to do the simplest thing, and then an hour or a day later you might be able to do it for a short time, and then it slips away again, doesn't it?
Yeah, Chris lost the ability to tie his shoelaces more or less from the very beginning. He hasn't used change, he hasn't used money for many years, and that's where technology has been a great bonus for people with dementia, because they can go to the shop with contactless debit cards, which gives Chris independence. The biggest thing for Chris was the loss of independence, because of his processing or lack of processing ability or multitasking. He had to give up his license very, very early. But we learned early on that to take those decisions ourselves, or for Chris to make that decision himself, put him in the same position as he would be if somebody had said, sorry, you can no longer drive. But by making the decision himself, it gave him control, some form of control that he'd lost.
Yeah, it was a bad time, but it was a good feeling. I always remember the feeling. It was a good feeling being in charge. And so I've remembered that, and I've tried to do that. That's been like a mantra to me. I found out all I can about my illnesses, and knowledge is power. Power is knowledge, you know. And if you understand something, you can really, really cope with it a lot better. But people don't realise it's not just tasks I don't see very well. You know, I sometimes don't hear very well, and it's not just lack of understanding. I do actually don't hear very well, and it's just my brain just coming and going, I think.
And as we became Dementia Friends champions when the initiative was first launched, and that taught us a great thing about dementia isn't just about memory. Chris has Alzheimer's, and that particular dementia is greatly involved in the loss of memory. But it's not just about memory, it's about so many other things. Chris can still change a light fitting, but he can't tie his shoelaces. And this is what's so difficult to understand. In the beginning, I did disable Chris by doing far too much for him. But then we learned by just trial and error that actually sometimes it's the equipment that can disable Chris. So for instance, money disables Chris.
And it's okay to get things wrong.
Yeah.
And the worst thing that can happen is someone starts doing everything for you, which happened to us. And we realised very early on. So now, you know, I might change go to change a light bulb or something, and it could take me a long time. I mean, it could take me half a day to realise I don't need any tools after searching the garage for a long time. But I get there.
So how do you manage that, Jane, particularly, because it's a natural reaction. If your partner has dementia, or your mother or your father, one of the natural reactions is to try and do everything for them.
She ignores me.
It helps being a bit lazy. You know, if I can re-able Chris if I can buy a kettle that Chris can use, such as a push button kettle, because he can't open the lid, then that means he can still make me a coffee. Chris has an iPad, and you know, if I have a lie-in or sometimes, he will Google how to make a coffee. Now, and then he follows the instructions on his iPad. But if the kettle is still disabling him, there's no way he can get around that. So we actually find out what is the problem, and then we overcome that particular problem, whether it's the lid of the kettle or whatever.
So it's dementia-friendly items that are friendly to me.
And it's interesting, isn't it? One of the projects that we sponsored at Alzheimer's Society in the Research Innovation Programme was something called How Do I? which was an app which enables you to customize to your own environment. So you can get help on the screen to tell you how to make a cup of tea or how to cook a meal or how to do everyday tasks. So you're actually re-empowering people to be able to do things.
And the good thing about a tablet or a laptop is that you can pause it, and you can sit down, have a rest, and then go back to it. So it's you can do it your own time, which makes a huge difference.
I know one of the things you said, Chris, at the time of the Panorama programme is that it's the unknown that scares us. And the danger is you feel disempowered because you feel you can't cope and you don't know enough. Have you deliberately tried to get more knowledge as you've gone through your dementia journey? Do you keep up to date with what's going on, and so you feel empowered by having information?
Absolutely. But I haven't got much to do these days, but I do enjoy reading about topics that I know about, and one of them is the dementia. So I do keep on top of things, and I'm a joint dementia research champion, so I do a lot of encouragement for people to get involved in research. I'm involved in research and various other projects, and it's about finding things that you can do, you know. What do you think?
And can anyone get involved in research? Is it open to everybody? Because I know when talking to people who have cancer, there's almost an expectation that if you get a diagnosis of cancer, you will be invited to participate in research, and it obviously gives people hope and makes them feel positive. Is there the opportunity for people to get involved in dementia research pretty widely?
There are many opportunities for people to get involved, and the researchers are desperate for people with dementia to be involved. The difficulty is people are afraid to ask. People think that with dementia you can't get involved. There's a very good initiative, Join Dementia Research, which connects people with, or research participants, people volunteering to be research participants, with the people looking to do studies. But one of the things Chris thought about research in the very beginning, that it would be invasive.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be very invasive, and with having a brain disease, they're going to be cutting open your brain. I had visions of almost like Frankenstein, you know. and I realised once I started taking part that most of it's just surveys, you know, and questionnaires. And it's something everyone can do. I think you almost get, when you don't understand dementia and what's going on with you, then you almost get a learned helplessness. Yeah. And you read all about the bad things and the black mats and this and that and the other, and then you start to evade going near those things. And yet in the beginning, there's a beginning and a middle before the late stages, and I'm not in the late stages. I for a split second I might see a hole, but a split second later I know it's a mat. And I think you've got to get over this learned helplessness almost, and then find ways of adapting.
And how about the ability to contribute and influence the way the health and social care system works? Is there something, because often the hope of the future is something that can keep you dynamic and keep you engaged. Are there ways that anyone who's interested, who's got dementia or as a family caregiver, can help have an influence? And you're in Wales, so it'd be good to know an example of what you've done in Wales to actually make a better life and a better future for people by working with the government and the NHS.
Well, one thing that you said in the beginning, that people with dementia are their own experts, but I'm an expert only in my dementia, obviously, but then I've got a very broad understanding. And people can go on to steering groups, and people need to have a say in what's going on. But one of the best things is that I don't work for anyone. I'm not constrained, so I can really put my cards on the table, as it were.
I think when you may have heard him speak in your former position. You know, Chris will tell it exactly like it is, because they can't sack him. But they actually appreciate, we didn't realise that people at the top, they do appreciate that straight talking, because at their level, you know, at ministerial level, they need to hear the truth. And if they can't take it, then they shouldn't be there in the job. But we were involved with the Wales Dementia Action Plan, but we were proactive in looking for openings, looking for opportunities to get involved. So if we heard about something, we would contact the organiser, say, look, we are a couple living with dementia. We'd really like to attend your event. We'd really like to be involved. And then that way you can become involved and have your voice heard. It is very difficult. We hear lots of people saying, well, why aren't I invited? Why don't they know about me? Because you have to be proactive. And that can be a barrier for somebody with dementia, particularly somebody living on their own, because they may not have the PA logistical support that I can offer, Chris.
Most of the time that I've actually I've seen something going on, so I'll get the email details and I'll send them a nice polite email saying, is there any experts by experience speaking?
Yeah.
Those affected by the dementia themselves, you know, whether it be a carer or someone diagnosed. And most of the time I get a lovely reply back. They hadn't thought of it, it didn't enter their heads, they apologise, and they involve.
And they're actually very keen to have that lived experience, because it's something that you know, is extremely important. As you said, the Alzheimer's Society were very key in getting people's voices heard, or actually giving people a platform so that other people knew that the person with dementia still has an opinion, still has intelligence, and is still a valued member of society who can contribute, and contribute from that very unique position of having the condition.
I think a lot of people feel frightened about the fact that the doctor knows best, and somehow if the doctor says something, they shouldn't be able to comment. But it sounds like, from your experience, most doctors actually quite welcome the input from somebody with lived experience. They're not resistant to listening to you. They probably want to listen to you because they're learning all the time. We don't have the answers on dementia, do we? We're still discovering the realities of the disease.
If they're resistant to hearing what their patient has to say, then they need to either go back and have some kind of bedside manner teaching, or do some more research on the subject, because it is very it's only touched upon during the medical training.
There's not much information, is there, in the medical training? What about, go back to what you were saying about research? How much of the research that goes on at the moment is around drugs and drug therapies, and how much is it about ways of supporting people to live better with dementia? Because it seems, you know, an emphasis is often put on drugs, and lots of money goes in through pharmaceutical companies. Do we get enough other research into quality of life and things that can stimulate and keep your brain active while you're living with dementia?
There's still an awful lot of money being spent on finding the magic bullet.
The Holy Grail.
You know, but there's so many variants that contribute to dementia. Which one are they going to cure first, you know?
Many different types, more than 100 different types of dementia.
And they are starting to change things now. There's more and more research going on about coping strategies and about care and how to look after people, and about training. Dementia carers have just done a lot of stuff about training.
That's training carers in the job of actually upskilling us in the job of caring for somebody with dementia. But the majority of the research, as you say, is around the pharmaceuticals, and then they'll find something, this doesn't work, gone, finished, let's look for the next one. Before that Holy Grail comes, people like us, people like Mum, people like the 850,000 to 1 million people in the UK with dementia, we need to live before we get that Holy Grail. So in our generation, we're not going to benefit from it. So there's a massive amount of research needed in how to live with. Now, the videos that Care Visions are putting up, they are brilliant. They're evidence-based. They've done their research and they found out what will work, what will stimulate, and what will work for people with dementia. But without the research in the first place, these types of resources couldn't be produced.
And you do feel like you're banging your head against the wall a lot, you know, but I'm used to repeating myself. I don't always know I'm doing it anyway, so it's okay, you know, but people make so many misconceptions and so many assumptions, and they need to stop doing that. And that's about a lot of illnesses, a lot of diseases, especially this one. And what they don't take into effect, especially research-wise and going on to steering groups, is that you don't know who you were before you became this person living with dementia. You know, I could have been a CEO, I could have been a researcher myself, or a professor, a doctor, and they can't see past this person with dementia.
You can't see past the dementia label.
Yeah. Yeah, and do you think that's beginning to change, or is that still a long way to go before that changes?
It's a long way to go. We've made great inroads, but then for every inroad, you get a knockback. And I have to applaud Welsh Government here. We're still involved, even during this lockdown. We still have a meeting with Public Health Wales and the Welsh Government. And beginning, it was every week for their dementia, what they're going to do for people with dementia during COVID, during the lockdown, and they've listened to us. It's now then went to a fortnight. It's now down to 3 weeks because we're 13 weeks in, but they are still listening to our voice. We're their intelligence on the ground, if you like, and it's not just us. We get other people's views as well.
That's good, because I think it's, as you said earlier, any one person's experience is unique to them. And there are many different types of dementia as well. So you want to get as many voices as possible. What about the point, Jane, you said earlier about carers? Because my mother-in-law has dementia, and my wife said to me, slightly despairing, I wasn't cut out to be a carer. You know, it's not, I'm not trained. I don't know what I'm doing.
I wasn't trained to have dementia or emphysema. I don't know what I'm doing either.
I am not a natural carer. I used to find the children childish, and it was their job to be childish. And it's something that, you know, we all come up from a different angle.
Yeah, you are thrown into it.
Yeah, but also you go onto Dr. Google, and Dr. Google tells you you're going to have a nervous breakdown, you're going to go into carer burden, you're going to, and all Dr. Google does is terrify you. So you do come overcompensating and wrapping Chris in cotton wool, feeding him chicken soup, but he's not going to get better. And I'm involved with the charity Dementia Carers Count, who are training carers in the role of caring for somebody, but caring for myself, because if I go down, then Chris is going to come equally hard with me.
Well, so that's a place people can go to. They can go to Dementia Carers Count and actually get some support and not feel it, because I think part of the problem is the isolation you feel as a family carer with nobody to talk to and nobody to share your experience with. And that's why having those forums like Talking Point and other places where people can go and share their experiences.
Yeah,
can I just go back?
On the total lack of knowledge that people don't know what they don't know. So there's a lot out there now, but still, unless you know where to find it, you know, people don't know what they don't know. So it's a huge learning curve for people. It's such a complex disease.
Well, I've got some questions coming in, so I'm just going to look at those and have but meanwhile, I wanted to ask you to say a little bit more about the Care Visions videos, because what I like about the fact that Care Visions is committed to ongoing research. So they don't feel they've necessarily got the answer. They're continuing to do research, and it's all evidence-based. But just say a little bit about what do you like about those videos and what could be done to make them even better.
Okay. Well, you know me from many times, and I'm not I'm not a crafty, craft person. We're a bit different to other couples like us. However, I was actually drawn in. They do the one that we were really taken with was they were doing a craft in the beginning. It was just 10 minutes. So yeah, 10 minutes isn't a long time. Then we did, what was the next one? My memory's shocking.
Singing.
Then it finished with singing, and that was it, with the singing. Then it was the missing words, or the missing words and the singing. And that was really good. My critique of that would be some of the songs I didn't know. So there's no way I could know how to sing them, and they sang one line, which was great, but I wanted the next line, so I actually wanted more than they were giving. But the videos were half an hour, but the 10-minute slots worked for me, and I even liked the crafty bits, which I don't normally do, because it was so short. And when I say it was simple, even I could do it. Then it was it drew me in, and
that sounds an important message, Jane, is that although they're particularly developed and presented by dementia therapists, actually the content is suitable for everybody. Anyway, it may particularly work for dementia, but anyone who wants to keep themselves active and stimulated can benefit. So it's all part of a healthy aging agenda rather than just a dementia agenda.
Absolutely, and it helps some way to alleviate in isolation, doesn't it? Because there's nothing like a hug. But at least even doing virtual stuff, you're not on your own.
But also it gives us something to do together, and in our case to bicker about. But I did like the fact that there was an older song. I thought, oh, here we go. But then they had the Animals' House of the Rising Sun, which I was we used to read bikers in the day, and it was like, wow, I just didn't expect
But there is a danger, isn't there? You do find this stereotyped assumption that all that people want to do with dementia is listen to Vera Lynn and the White Cliffs of Dover.
Yeah.
Probably lots of people with dementia are more into Pink Floyd and The Who.
Well, none of us are getting any younger.
Okay, I've got a couple of questions. I want to ask you a couple of questions. So, David Wilkinson said, thanks for this presentation. One question I have is about coping with diagnosis. How do you address being told that you have dementia? And I think that's a really important question, because I've come across people who actually avoid getting a diagnosis because they're so worried about what it would mean. So what advice can you give people to dealing with the fact that they might be told they've got dementia?
A lot of the
stigma.
No, a lot of the angst is from the delivery of the diagnosis. Chris took 13 months to get a diagnosis, and not once did anybody mention the word dementia until the actual point of diagnosis. Now, we're not unintelligent. We kind of worked out what we were looking at, but it was still a big slap in the face. But the delivery of our diagnosis disempowered us more than the fact that he had Alzheimer's, because the delivery was so dire, so negative, so there is nothing we can do, just go home and live with it. And when we said, well, so what happens next? It was like, well, you won't see me now till you're 65. At the time, Chris was 51. And
yes.
So that abandoned us. So the diagnosis, nobody wants a diagnosis of dementia, of any sort of illness, but neither do we want a diagnosis of cancer or of leukemia or anything. And just not having a diagnosis doesn't mean it's going to go away. But you found it a relief.
Yeah, I had a label for my behaviour, which explained Jane's behaviour.
Yes, yeah.
And I wasn't going mad. And I do know now, with hindsight, that there's so much you can do with an earlier diagnosis. There are so many things you can do, as well as actually getting used to having it almost.
Yeah. No, as I said before, nobody wants this diagnosis, but the earlier you get it, there are some drugs on the market that will slow down the symptoms, or they will maximize your cognition. They don't slow down the progression of the disease, but they do maximize your cognition. But the earlier you start those, if they're going to work for you, then the better effect they have. They keep you less advanced for a lot longer.
Yes.
You keep you in touch with the world longer, don't they?
And I think
you get things in place as well, that you'd never think of, and you can have those conversations that you never think to have.
I think that's a really good point, because one of the things you said in the Panorama programme is hiding it is easier than facing up to it, but you can only run for so long and it'll catch up. And then I still have a life, I think was the message that you said, that life may be a bit different from what it was before, but you still do have a life, and you can feel positive about the things you can do.
And that's the thing, isn't it? With a life-changing diagnosis is life-changing. You have to accept it's going to change your life.
Can I just ask you a second question? We've probably got time for one more question. So this is from Sharon Pond. It says, hi guys from Sheffield. We have a friend who has recently been diagnosed. If you don't mind me asking, how did your friends cope with being told you have dementia?
Well, I announced it on Facebook because I reached so many people all at once, and it was cheaper than making a phone call. And I wanted the elephant out of the room. But you know what? Everyone was brilliant about it. People wanted to know more, that they wanted to understand it. And I think I had the worst problem telling them.
Yeah, I had the worst problem because I was in a state of shame. I was ashamed of Chris's diagnosis. Totally, no reason for it other than the whole stigma thing around dementia. And he said he was going to put it on Facebook, and I was like, okay then. Anyway, it was the best thing it did, because it took the elephant out of the room.
Yes.
And then people were able to ask. There were no whispers in the background. There were no, Chris is doing strange things. Or do you think they know? Do you think it really, being open is the best policy. And it's, if you give the delivery of, I've got dementia, it's dreadful, which, potentially it will become, but not yet. then you give people permission to ask about it, because none of us know what we don't know, and it's best to get as much information as you can.
And nobody should have the stress of a secret, you know, and especially one that they don't have to keep secret.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good note. And I remember one of the comments that Kate, your daughter, said in her, because she had more than a walk-on part of the Panorama programme. She was quite present in it, and she said it's not all doom and gloom.
No.
And I think that's an important message, that there's a positive outlook, and you both look positive, even though, you know, it's not where you would have chosen to be. It's a disease that you happen to get, that fate throws at you. But I think the message you've given today is that there are positive things you can do. The support the wider community can give you through Dementia Friends, through other initiatives, the support good quality material like the Care Visions videos can do, all help to make life better for people living with dementia. So we're going to have to stop there because we're out of time. But Chris and Jane, thank you so much for starting off this series of conversations. We're going to, as I say, be here every Tuesday. We can have conversations on Twitter in the meantime. Please do go and use the YouTube material Care Visions has put up, and keep the conversation going on Facebook, Twitter, and any other social media you use. We're going to have a mix of people over the weeks. As I say, every few weeks we'll have people with personal experience. But next week, I'm very pleased to say that my guest will be Terry Waite, the humanitarian and author, who himself knows a thing or two about isolation. As people will remember, he spent 4 years in solitary confinement in Lebanon when he was taken hostage while he was trying to secure the release of another hostage, John McCarthy. So Terry Waite, who's already put a couple of his own reminiscences on the Care Visions YouTube site and Facebook, so please have a look at those. But Terry Waite will be my guest next Tuesday at 4 o'clock. But thank you, Chris and Jane, and I hope you continue to live well with your experiences and share them at every opportunity with other people. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
See you next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye.